said, my name is Sari Salvesen. I am a clinical therapist at Linden Oaks. I work in the Plainfield outpatient location for the PHP IOP programs. I have been a clinician for 12 plus years, working mostly with adolescents, and most of that time has been at Linden Oaks. And I'm going to be talking about a pretty hot topic right now as we're leading towards the end of the school year, and that's maintaining stability for the return to school. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is setting up routine for the summer and returning to school, successfully, and how setting up a routine can help that. So some of the objectives that I will be talking about first is why is routine important for mental health? Talking about key points to focus on over the summer and building that routine and what that would look like to set your kid up for success. And why, again, going into that routine being helpful for mental health and mood stability over the summer. And then preparing for school transition as summer is coming to an end to really help for success into the next school year. So the first piece that I will be talking about is why routine is important for mental health, especially, for everybody, but I'm really focusing on adolescents. So why is it important? Adolescent, time comes with intense physical, emotional, and social changes. Their world is in flux, and the predictability of routine is really, really grounding for an adolescent. I think that consistency and routine help teenagers prepare for their day-to-day, and that reduces anxiety and stress. So kids with anxiety who aren't able to have any sense of control, that predictability is really helpful in reducing the symptoms of anxiety. So I'm going to talk about some ways that the routine and the benefits of a routine, what those benefits are, what they include. So first and foremost, I think enhance closeness and bonding with your kids. I think if you're being consistent with your kids with routine, if the family's following some sense of routine, you're reinforcing this routine, you're really sending the message that you're there for your teen and that they can count and trust on you. And kids really do need routine. And a lot of kids actually thrive in it and know that they do well with routine. Some kids not so much, but I think even so, it's still sending that message. And I think they realize that when you're reinforcing that. Another benefit is just their physical well-being. The regular bedtimes help set your teen's body clock. So they know when it's time to get up. They know when it's time to get to bed. And similar with meal times, regular meal times help teens stay on track and have healthier habits. And, sleep and, food is really directly related to mood. If kids are sleeping well, and they're, providing their bodies and their brains with nutrition, that's going to help set a foundational base for mental health. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more as the presentation goes on. So increased responsibility. When teens' chores are scheduled, their expectations are clear and consistent, they learn to keep commitments and care for others. And that helps with their executive functioning skills. The predictable routines help teens learn valuable lifelong skills. Those are time management skills, organization, self-control, monitoring themselves. With school being in session, there is that organic routine put in place. Come summertime, they don't have that piece of school that offers some of those executive functioning skills, time management, having to wake up and be at school every day, having to go to bed and wake up for school the next day. So having a routine over the summer helps really maintain some of these things that they have throughout the school year, but allows for a little bit more flexibility without being so rigid. So with that, just a couple more things to keep in mind with the benefits of it. It helps reduce overwhelm. When kids have different areas that they have to be prioritizing, it could be chores, it could be homework, it could be friends, it could be, any responsibilities they have. When there's not that consistent, clear expectation, a lot of times kids will get overwhelmed, and without that executive functioning skill or without that consistent schedule, oftentimes they'll start avoiding or they'll procrastinate. And then that increases the overwhelm, which then increases the avoidance. And come school time, we see a lot of that. We'll see avoidance of school. Their homework's not done and they avoid or they procrastinate, and then the work piles up. Or How do I prioritize time with my friends if I haven't got my work done? And it just kind of snowballs from there and leads to a lot of these avoidant behaviors. It also connects teens to their values. So if kids are having some sense of routine and they have some autonomy, which I'm also going to go into, that really helps them understand what's important to them. What do they need to prioritize? What are some things that they want that routine to look like? What is important to them? What are they, hobbies or skills or things are they learning that they can find and explore their identity and things that have meaning to them? And again, it reinforces basic needs. It reinforces the foundation of mental health, focusing on their sleeping, their eating, their diet, their exercise, things that really help flourish their mental health. Okay. So with that being said, of some of the benefits of routine, I'm going to kind of the flip side is like the lack of structure and what happens. So again, going back to that piece of school, having that organic sense of structure already put in place throughout the school year, and then school is out, they have this abyss of free time. And while I think it's important for kids to have some flexibility in that and not have such a rigid routine because they've been really stimulated academically all year, I do think having that routine and structure is really helpful because here's the impact if there is no structure after having some of that rigid structure throughout the school year. So that lack of structure in summer it can interfere with their self-care. They're maybe more inclined to stay up late, which of course having a little bit of a later bedtime in summer makes sense, but if they're staying up really late, they might sleep all day. That might impact just their sleep schedule in general. That might increase their electronic use, that kind of doom scrolling, laying in bed, and boredom, which boredom is a big trigger for adolescents, which could lead to really unhealthy behaviors, avoidance, isolation, which all of these things really impact mental health. This also can decrease their physical activity, which can decrease their motivation, which also impacts their mood. So when kids have a bit of free time, oftentimes they don't have enough of that skill set to really know what to do with that time, which then leads to some of these isolative behaviors or that phone or those video games or that time in the room or that time online. And that really might impact their ability to get things done. And again, their sleep is impacted. So come school the following year and coming back into a routine, it's really hard to regulate if it's been, up and down throughout the summer. Their emotions have been a little dysregulated because they're not doing the things that really help with their mental health, which is physical activity, sleeping well, eating well, having responsibility, having time with their friends. So other factors that can contribute to low mood, mental health, factors in depression and anxiety, again, is that lack of like daily physical activity. Even just getting up in the morning, going to school, gym, walking through the hallways. Sometimes kids have sports or different activities. They're busy throughout the day, right? They're walking around, they're not in their room. The lack of academic challenges, right? That's a stimulation of the brain that they're having all day, right? Sometimes there's too much of that, or kids aren't always loving how much academic stimulation they're having, but that does help keep them stimulated through the day, keeps their brain functioning. So the lack of stimulation and too much free time can be impactful of their mental health, especially going from having that throughout the most of the year to then having none of it in the summertime. Okay, so with that being said, we can see that there's a lot of benefits for having routine, right? And the lack of routine can be a detriment to mental health. So how do we find that balance from not being so rigid and having too much stimulation all year to then having none at all and having this abyss of free time and boredom, which could lead to, poor choices and behaviors and patterns of behavior that could lead to, increasing mental health issues. So balance is kind of the key. So really giving kids some autonomy in what this looks like over the summer, I think is a really, really important step in creating what that summer routine is going to look like. I think a great place to start is those basic needs and setting the foundation. So starting with like a morning and nighttime routine, are they going to have to get up at the same time and go to bed the same time that they would during the school year? No, but I don't know that we want kids sleeping in too late or staying up all night that they're sleeping all day. So finding that, common ground in the family of like, what does that look like where we're shooting to get 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep each night, not, and having a similar nighttime routine each night. And maybe it's not the same as it would be during the school year where they're doing homework and things of that nature, but maybe cutting off some of the electronic time before bed, doing something relaxing, having their self-care, their daily hygiene, and in the morning again, having some time of wake up time, eating breakfast, making sure that their meals and their bedtimes are consistent for that body's clock to kind of have that consistency, and as well as like their meal time. We really want to increase their emotional resiliency, and I'm going to go into that in this presentation as well. But the foundation of that is really the basic needs and doing things that help them really keep that emotional resiliency high throughout the summer and reducing their vulnerability to crisis. So if kids aren't sleeping well, if they're bored, if they're isolating, if they're in their room on their electronics, that's going to make them more vulnerable to crisis. And what I mean by crisis, that could vary on a spectrum, right? It can make them more vulnerable to increased depression, increased anxiety. If kids are already really struggling with mental health, depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, that might escalate into more of a heightened depression or anxiety. It helps them connect to their values. So by giving them some autonomy, I think it's like, what do they want to focus on for the summer? What are some things that they want to do? Are there hobbies? Are there skills? Do they want to volunteer? Do they want to get a job? So really having that conversation of like brainstorming some things that are enjoyable, things that like creating new rituals, doing things together as a family. So having that conversation together and what are their goals? What do they want? What skills do they want to cultivate? What have they really struggled with throughout the year that this would be a really good time to work on? Giving them a sense of purpose and drive, and that motivation is going to be really helpful in setting up that routine if they're feeling inclined to want to hone a new skill or enjoyable activities that they can do. So I always go back to like the balance wheel, and over the school year, they're very stimulated academically, right? One part of the balance wheel is going to be more prominently like looked at and practiced because of they're in school, but the rest might have not been neglected, but we might need to restore some balance in some other areas now that there's more free time, there's more flexibility. So using like a kind of, you're creating your own sense of balance wheel. So like looking at the targets of mental health, right? A functioning adolescent, you really want to see sleep, daily hygiene, hobbies, socialization, getting outside, family time, right? These are like the ways we see adolescents functioning, and all of those pieces are really important. Their own self-care, how are they taking care of themselves? So where, in looking at this with your kid, of like kind of pinpointing the different areas, the different priorities, maybe they have a job, or maybe they have different activities or clubs or things that they want to continue doing over the summer. What areas might be a little off kilter? What areas in the balance wheel do they need to restore a little bit? Do they really need to focus on working on their sleep hygiene and their self-care? Have they not been able to spend a lot of time socially with their friends throughout the school year? Do they need to be a little bit more social? And maybe that's hard for some kids, right? Maybe they are more inclined to isolate or avoid. So what would that look like in getting creative of different things that they can do to be more socially active or spend more time with friends? So it helps build a foundation and create some more emotional bandwidth. So if kids have been, stressed out by the end of the year, they've been stimulated academically, this is a good time to really empty out some of the, heavier things that have been stressful and create some more emotional bandwidth with them this summer and focus on different areas that they can target to help themselves to feel better. So then same thing as the balance wheel. Another way to look at it is the Maslow's hierarchy of need. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but this really helps set the foundation like I've been talking about, making sure their basic needs are met. Are they sleeping well? Are they eating well? Are they getting, adequate time outside? And really starting there and building that foundation, because if kids are wanting to move above and beyond that and work on self-worth and belonging and, really hone new skills, that is always like a good place to start, and helping them kind of use this to identify where maybe they're struggling, where they want to focus on. So again, these are like the balance wheel and this hierarchy of need are just a good place to kind of start with your kids of let's kind of talk through these different areas. And if kids are struggling more with mental health, what does affect mood? When we're not sleeping well, do we get more cranky? When are alone in our room too long, are we like lacking connection? Are we lonely? Are we feeling alienated? If we're not eating well, how is that affecting our mood? Like we've heard the term hangry. Like, I think there's something to that. If kids aren't eating and nourishing their brain, they're going to be tired, they're going to be unmotivated and irritable. So making sure that they're eating well and they're, getting outside and getting that vitamin D. And, I think when the winter time and fall, now that there's some sunlight, I think kids get impacted by the seasons. And I think having more time outside can also help with their mood. So this just helps kind of gauge where they really need to focus to help restore some of the balance wheel. So I'm going to introduce a coping skill that we work on here in program, and that's called strength. And it's 8 micro skills. It's an acronym, as you can see. And what this skill does is I used the term earlier of building emotional resiliency. So when kids are doing things to their daily routine, right? If they're adding these little micro skills, and they're not going to use all of them, right? That's a little bit, too much of an expectation. But if maybe like looking at that balance wheel, looking at that hierarchy of needs and really targeting where maybe they need to work on and prioritize a little bit more. So maybe sleep, taking care of themselves, wherever that is, adding these to their daily routine can increase their ability to manage stressors. It can reduce their crisis behaviors or really unhealthy patterns of behavior, depending on what they're struggling with: avoidance, isolation, maladaptive coping, so like numbing their emotions in different forms of, harm. It could be harmful. Reducing their emotional suffering and increasing motivation. This helps increase their self-worth and confidence, and just helps maintain their overall wellness. So when these things are added to the daily routine, these help maintain their stability throughout the summer. So I'm going to give some examples of this, of where this would look like in the routine. So again, I'm going to go back. So if you see this, it's sleep, take care of self, resisting urges, exercise, nutrition, gain mastery, time for yourself, and healthy self-talk. So I'm going to start with resisting urges. Too much time can lead to boredom and overwhelm, leading to avoidance, isolation, endless scrolling or doom scrolling. And this can help with, the safety and security, making good choices, having curfew, positive supports. So resisting urges, again, is when there's a lot more free time. That could lead to the urge to want to just lay in bed all day. And sometimes that feels good at first, of like, oh, school's out, I don't have anything to do, I could just rest. But that could quickly lead to being in our anxious thoughts, or in our thoughts, or on the phone and comparing ourselves to other people. And that could get harmful. So making good choices, resisting those urges to go up in bed and lay in bed all day, be on the phone all day, play video games all day, right? Having a curfew, knowing where your kids are at and where they're at. Summertime might mean there's more social opportunity that could also lead to certain urges or things that might not be healthy for them. So having those conversations of like, what is the curfew? What is the plan? And sometimes this is for older kids, or, if kids are going to parties and there might be things there that might be tempting, having that plan of, what time they need to be home if they're not having school every day and they're not having that wake up time, and they know what time they have to be home every night, can be helpful. Setting boundaries with the phone, setting boundaries with electronic use, how much time they're spending in their room, kind of looking at it out of that lens. And again, I've talked about this again, but this is part of strength in that sleep and daily hygiene. So morning and nighttime routines, it helps with that body clock, right? So come school in the fall, if we have been sleeping all day or up all night, it's really hard to readjust that sleep schedule come mid-August, when they have to get ready to go back to school and start sleeping. And again, that sleeping is really important for their mental health. So building mastery, this is, the title could be a little deceiving because this isn't about mastering or perfectionism, but it's really honing a skill. It's watching oneself improve at something that's slightly challenging yet conquerable. It helps build self-esteem and that internal self-worth versus getting those likes on Instagram or something that's a little bit more externally motivated. And it can help with motivation, purpose, drive, and really help kids feel like they're getting better at something. And when we're having that conversation and giving kids this autonomy of what they want to do this summer, what they want to focus on, this is a good area of like, do we want to learn a new skill? Do we want to try a sport? Do we want to get involved in volunteering? Like, what is it something that they want to see get better at? It could be cooking. It could be learning a new recipe. It could be learning a new trick on a skateboard. And there's so many different ways you can learn gardening, so really brainstorming ideas and then having that be part of that routine, whether they have built-in time throughout the week. Maybe they volunteer once or twice a week, or maybe they are going to lessons for something, or maybe they're going to the library. But that allows them to have some say in that. And when kids are more willing and more motivated when it's coming from something that is important to them, it gives them that drive and that purpose. And when they're cultivating that through the summer, come school time, it's a huge skill set for them to maintain through the school year. And the school year comes with a lot of expectations, a lot of things that they not necessarily want to do. But this helps build some of that foundation for these skills throughout the summer. And then exercise, I kind of skipped over, but that doesn't mean it's not important. I think it does help with just in mood. It increases those endorphins. This doesn't mean kids need to go run on the treadmill. This just means getting their bodies moving. It could be walking around the block, going on a bike ride as a family, going rollerblading, which I've seen as like a big new thing, which I love and plan to be doing with my children as well. But getting the family out, getting outside, it's a good mood boost. It helps them get outside, and it helps them, get stuck out of those patterns of isolation or boredom or being in their room. So taking that balance wheel, taking that hierarchy of need, those are just places to start looking and prioritizing what kids want to work on, where they need to focus, where they need to really, increase that emotional bandwidth over the summer. And so one of the other things we teach in program, but I just think is a really helpful tool for anybody, is connecting to values and goal setting. So what I mean by values is really having kids are more willing and more motivated when they have more autonomy over what they're doing and when it aligns with what they value. And SMART goals is a way that kids can create these small action steps in conquering their goals. So let's say they're, and this is great for come school time, and it helps reduce overwhelm. So it helps with accountability, focus, direction, making choices aligned with their values. It helps them move towards, those hierarchy of needs just in small steps, and it helps with time management. So small goals over time help move towards values and increase the ability to manage stress and overwhelm. And these are huge factors for school anxiety and avoidance. So what I often see happen working with kids is they don't have that ability to set those small action steps. And so a task seems like a mountain. So when they can break it down into little small, like stepping stones up the mountain, they are much more able to conquer these small steps at a time. So it's basically not biting off more than you can chew. So when we're working on those foundational sleep hygiene, building mastery, like learning a new skill, it's doing it in really small steps, right? So if a kid's not sleeping at all, and having the expectation that they're going to sleep 9 hours a night, their electronics are going to be off 2 hours before bed, that's a lot to ask. And sometimes that doesn't set kids up for success. But what can help is, how do we break these things down into slightly challenging yet doable so they feel good about themselves when they conquer it? So maybe we start lowering the bedtime a little bit at a time. So maybe half an hour increments, right? Maybe we start with just one change in routine. So maybe it's sleep. Maybe it is getting out of our room more often. Instead of trying to tackle everything, it's starting with one thing at a time and breaking that down into smaller steps. And SMART goals really emphasis on, is this a measurable goal? Is this attainable? What's the timeline? So kids can say, yes, I completed that today, right? If I'm trying to clean my room and my room is a mess, today my goal is to clean up all the garbage that's in my room and take it downstairs by 2:00, right? So it's very concrete, it's manageable, and each day builds upon the next one. So that's what SMART goals is. So when you're creating these routines and you're trying to establish structure and what that looks like, doing it in a way that's not tackling everything at once, but trying to start with one thing and moving from there. So again, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And I think it's important to clarify exactly what we aim to do. And this includes setting a time frame and specific actionable behaviors that we can move towards. Okay. So now this is going to shift into maybe August, as we've established a little bit of routine. We're in a routine, and now it's time to get back into school where the routine's going to get a little bit more rigid than it's been over the summer. We're getting back into that academic atmosphere. And we're trying to really reduce that school avoidance, that school anxiety, and really try to empower them to feel prepared for school and set them up for a successful school transition. So there's two parts I'm going to talk about with this, and that is wellness action planning and COPE ahead planning. The wellness action plan is like the blueprint, right? It's like, what did we learn? What did we take away that keeps us at our best? What helps us maintain our mood? What do we know we need every day, every week? And then the COPE ahead is like, there's going to be unforeseen things that we can't always control. So what are we prepared to do when those things may or may not happen to empower ourselves that we can get through them? So wellness action planning, some of the questions that I like to think about is, how do I know I'm doing well? What activities, supports, and self-care do I need on the daily and on the weekly? And as adjustments in routine as we get closer to school. So really taking those, like maybe 2 weeks before school starts, really adjusting that bedtime, right? Practice that for 2 weeks. If they've been getting up at 9 o'clock and they now need to get up at 6 o'clock, again, setting that in that SMART goal way, half an hour increments, hour increments, not trying to all of a sudden just be like, okay, now we have to get up at, if your kid doesn't do well in the mornings, right? Being mindful of that, and 2 weeks before or 3 weeks before school starts, really starting to get that bedtime a little bit earlier, that wake up time a little bit earlier. You know, what do I need to make sure I am making my bed every morning? So I've done one thing that's productive, and at least I know that one thing is going to help me feel a little bit more motivated throughout the day. Do I know that when I eat breakfast, my mood is better? If I'm taking medication, do I need to take that at the same time every day, right? A self-soothe kit. So what are some things that I can bring to school that might help me, right? Do I need a fidget? Do I need, depending on if there's coping skills that your kid, deep breathing or, a grounding skill, can I put these on a little note card to have with me? Can I have some candy? Can I have some things that just help me kind of get through the day? So if the day is stressful, what are the different things in my control that I can make that day feel a little bit more tolerable for myself? So again, it's just really reviewing what works, what is going to help them feel prepared, and what is in their control, and really like what did I learn maybe this summer? What didn't work last year that we can work on implementing this year? And then COPE ahead planning. So what COPE ahead planning is saying is identifying potential stressors, walking through supports, walking through the coping skills and the resources that are at school. And if there are certain things, maybe it's bullying, maybe it's the hallways, maybe it's the overstimulation, maybe it's the crowd, maybe it's just the same kind of redundant routine of school every day. Whatever that is, it's having that discussion and having kids kind of visualize themselves in that stressful situation. However, watching themselves cope through that successfully. Maybe they're, closing their eyes and visualizing themselves coping in the way that would feel successful to them, or how their aspired self would cope through that. And so just having those conversations, having a COPE ahead plan in place, knowing who their supports are at school. So I think if kids have this knowledge, that can help empower them to feel more secure in what's to come. Every school year comes with whatever grade they're in, like a registration or walking through the school classroom, knowing their locker code, figuring out what are some of the things that are conquerable, that are in your control to help feel more successful in the school year. Okay. So that's a wrap. That's everything I'm kind of wanted to go over. I really wanted to hit the points of just the importance of this routine. Yes, it's going to be more flexible over the summer, but just what are some areas to help focus on giving your kids some autonomy in that, and spending more time as a family or making the family a big part of it. And then I really wanted to help understand why lack of routine could be detrimental to mental health. And then what are some things that you can just have in your back pocket come, August when we need to start preparing. And I think Kelly's going to go into a little bit more of resources. Now that it's summertime, there's a little bit more downtime and what Linden Oaks and some of the programs can also provide if, school avoidance or school stress is something that's big. And, as a parent, having more resources. So thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you so much for this. It was really, really helpful. And do we have any questions? Otherwise, I'd love to share some information and resources available, as summer is a really great time to seek treatment if this past school year was hard for anyone. So we do have a couple exciting programs that we are happy to share with you. At Linden Oaks, we treat depression, anxiety, addictions, eating disorders, PTSD, and other mental health concerns for adolescents and children. So we do have our child parent anxiety IOP that is available for ages 8 through 11, along with a new summer school anxiety IOP. And both of these two programs are set 3-week programs for anyone who struggles with separation anxiety, panic attacks, or other anxiety related symptoms such as school refusal. So I can definitely share how to access these programs. Another program that is out of our St. Charles location is the Emerging Adults Program, and this is really geared towards ages 18 through 25-year-olds. So anyone who is struggling entering into adulthood. And again, we treat addictions and eating disorders, PTSD through adolescent specific programs as well. So if you are interested, or if you know someone who is struggling with their mental illness, there are resources available. You can access them by selecting the QR code or calling our 24/7 helpline at 630-305-5027. And this will just get you connected to an assessment to inquire more about our specialized programs.